parpadeó, bostezó, masticó, tragó, guiñó un ojo. These are all actions you perform almost every day, but Spanish learners never learn these verbs. And why is that? Because beginners usually learn eat, drink, sleep, speak, but not the tiny actions that happen constantly through the day. Amigas y amigos, welcome back. This is Profe Juan, and by the end of this video, you'll learn some of the most useful face-related verbs in Spanish, why native speakers use them all the time, and how Spanish often uses one verb where English needs an entire description. Not complicated grammar, just how Spanish actually works. Most learners can say, I ate, I slept, I speak, but what about I blinked, I yawned, I swallowed, I winked? These actions happen constantly, and Spanish has specific verbs for all of them. Let me remind you first, one interesting thing about Spanish is that it often creates a specific verb for a very specific action. Instead of describing the action, Spanish frequently named it directly. That's what makes this verb so useful. And here's a big idea. Spanish often turns tiny physical actions into full verbs, especially actions involving your eyes, your mouth, and basically your face. Once you learn them, you start hearing them everywhere. Let's start with the eyes. Parpadear, parpadeó, he blinked. Parpadear, you know, this action. Parpadeé varias veces. I blinked several times. This is one of the actions everyone does constantly. I mean, literally you perform this action like thousands, I don't know if millions of times in a day. So it's crazy that we don't learn that action like more frequently, I don't know, sooner in your journey, right? Many learners never learn the verb. Look at this one. Guiñar. Me guiñó un ojo. She winked at me. Guiñar, guiñar el ojo in this case. Guiñó un ojo y sonrió. He winked and smiled. This is a very common verb in stories and conversations, you know? When you're like, if you're a storyteller, if you're reading a children's book, hey, guiñar un ojo is very common. Now let's move to the mouth, because Spanish has even more verbs here. Masticar. Masticaba lentamente. He was chewing slowly. Tienes que masticar bien la comida. Tienes que masticar bien la comida. You have to chew your food well. Masticar, it's also used when you need to, in this case, like separate an idea or a concept. Not so common in a formal language, but hey, real life Spanish, it happens. You know, masticar una idea. You're chewing an idea. This is something interesting for you. Tragar. Tragó el agua rápidamente. He swallowed the water quickly. Me cuesta tragar estas pastillas. I have trouble swallowing these pills. And attention, because as masticar, to swallow also have different uses in real life Spanish, ¿no? Hey, por ejemplo, me cuesta tragar a esa persona, like, hey, you can't stand like being around that person. Me cuesta tragar la información. That information is hard to swallow, to digest in a way, no? So, you know now, hey, tragar, masticar, and many learners know comer, that is to eat. But eating includes masticar and tragar. Different action, different verbs. And again, not only used for, you know, things that you do with your mouth, but also in real life Spanish, very useful verbs. Now, let's look at a verb everyone recognizes, but few people know how to say. Bostezar. And look at this. Bostezó durante la película. He droned during the movie. No podía dejar de bostezar. I couldn't stop yawning. And this is one of the extremely common actions that learners often describe with a full sentence. Well, in real life Spanish, we simply use bostezar, you know? I know when you open your mouth y haces así, no. This is super common, and knowing this verb will help your real life Spanish, you know, skyrocket. Bostezar, yo bostezo, tú bostezas, nosotros bostezamos, él bostezó durante la película. Now, let's talk about expressions on your face, facial expressions. Sonreír. Sonrió cuando llegó. She smiled when she arrived. Simple. Common. Essential. Sonreír. Fruncir el ceño. Fruncir el ceño. Él frunció el ceño. He frowned. Literally, he furrowed his brow. But in practice, he frowned. You'll hear this constantly in books, movies, and stories. To be honest, this is not such a common expressions, you know, in real life Spanish, but you'll see it everywhere if you're reading a book, right? Notice what's happening. These verbs aren't advanced. They're everyday actions. We just don't usually learn them early. And let's talk about why this matters. Imagine you want to tell a story. Instead of saying, he opened and closed his eyes quickly, that would be weird, you can say, parpadeó. Instead of saying, he opened his mouth because he was tired, you can say, bostezó. Instead of, he chewed the food, you can say, masticó. One verb, more precise, more natural. And that's why native speakers use it, you know, because we have a word for that. So again, eyes, parpadear, guiñar, mouth, masticar, tragar, bostezar, face, sonreír, fruncir el ceño. Hey, Spanish often uses a very specific verb for a very specific action, and that's the whole pattern. Quick recap. Spanish has many verbs for small actions involving your face. Like again, parpadear, to blink, guiñar, to wink, masticar, to chew, tragar, to swallow, bostezar, to yawn, and sonreír, to smile, and fruncir el ceño, to frown. The big idea is simple. Spanish often uses one precise verb where learners tend to use a longer description. And that's why these verbs are worth learning. But now it's your turn. Write one sentence using one of today's verbs. For example, bostecé durante la clase, or hey, me guiñó el ojo. One sentence is more than enough. I'll make sure to read it. I'll make sure to interact with you in the comments right there. Maybe correct your sentence or just give you a thumbs up. Hey, amigo, amiga, if this helped you learn some everyday Spanish verbs, hey, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Like the video, and I'll see you en el próximo video. Un guiño para ti.